as we discussed a bit earlier in the program, I'm still a little unsatisfied with the level of detail and really the interest in getting the detail associated with the horrific shooting that occurred at the Kansas City Chiefs Super Bowl parade/celebration, where a woman was murdered and 23 people were shot. But that's not the focus of Kansas City Mayor Quentin Lucas. He's focused on something Missouri Governor Mike Parson said that just cannot stand. Look, we have to get the noun usage proper if we're going to have civil society where we paper over the shooting of 23 people.
He's going to join us later on in this program. After the shooting, he said we can't let some thugs and criminals just take over and ruin what happened. I gather that's not quite your assessment of what happened that day.
I have respect for the governor. We get along well. I disagree strongly with how he would describe that situation. I certainly do think this was criminal activity. It was lawlessness, and I think that that's troubling. But thugs is a dog whistle in the most classic sense, and I have seen this dog whistle time and again. There's this kind of giant conservative theory on social media now that the reason that mugshots haven't been shown is because the purported defendants are black, and if it were a white defendant, we would have just shown them. That is absolutely preposterous. There are protections to juveniles. Our city has a gun violence problem.
Yeah, I'd say a city has a gang problem.
Well, it sounded like at least Quentin Lucas was mildly troubled by two people apparently opening fire in a crowd of tens of thousands of people and injuring 23, killing one, and obviously it could have been so much worse. And he's mildly troubled like that. But I mean, let's focus on what's really important. The governor's use of thugs to describe people who would commit such a heinous, thoughtless, barbaric act. Let's see how you describe them as what's really material here.
God, I mean, I would have called them gangbangers.
For more on this and other law-related matters, we're pleased to be joined by Will Scharf. He's a former federal prosecutor, appellate attorney for former President Donald Trump, and Republican candidate for Missouri Attorney General as well. Will, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Great to be with you guys. Thanks so much for having me on.
Could we have you, as a former federal prosecutor, could we have you adjudicate this matter between Governor Parson and Mayor Lucas there? What is the proper terminology, since this is what apparently is important to the mayor?
Yeah, I think thug really sums it up. I don't see how that's a dog whistle. These guys are thugs. The dirty secret is that practically every weekend night in St. Louis and Kansas City, you have a situation where gangs are drawing guns on each other and more often than not shooting at each other. The only thing unique about this incident in Kansas City is that it happened at a highly publicized, very public event with the Chiefs parade going on. But the gang violence problem in St. Louis and Kansas City, I know the same is true in Chicago. It's a profound problem. And for a guy like Quentin Lucas, the mayor of Kansas City, to be focusing on, terminology and trying to turn this into some kind of a race thing, it's just silly. I mean, we've got to get this problem under control. Otherwise, our cities are going to continue just being these wastelands of crime.
Well, do you think we'll know more about the situation? I mean, if these two are tried as adults?
Yeah, I think that's where the legal system is going to go here. A real problem we have in Missouri, though, is soft bail laws that allow even violent criminals to bond out after 24 hours. It often takes a while to get them charged. It takes even longer to get them in custody. And a trial like this could drag for years and years while these kids are still out on the street, probably tooling around with guns, probably hanging out with their same sort of gang sets. And that's just not a way to control crime. We need tougher bail laws. We need pretrial detention. We need truth in sentencing laws. Otherwise, these problems are just going to continue reoccurring time and time again.
Is there anything about what occurred that day? I mean, I as I said at the outset, I just feel like I'm not getting the complete story and an explanation that supports the official story that's been offered. Any details that you have that you understand to be true that have not been reported, or anything that has been misreported?
Based on conversations with law enforcement, I think the official story seems to be what happened, that this was, two rival groups that kind of beefed with each other. Guns were drawn and shots were fired. Again, that's something that happens in St. Louis and Kansas City with surprising regularity. The only difference here is that it happened in the middle of a Super Bowl parade. But this gang problem is a real issue, and it's turned our streets into just a shooting gallery, but more often than not.
Well, with respect to that soft bail law that you were describing, of course, we know all about that in Illinois. Much worse, even worse than that, even worse than yours. Where's the Republican Party on that?
Well, I think in Missouri we have an issue with a lot of people who put ours next to their name, who don't really share our conservative values and who aren't really willing to put themselves on the line to get good conservative policy done. This is something that I've been calling for a while. The federal constitutional standard, the Supreme Court has said that if somebody's a danger to the community or if they present a risk of non-appearance, they can be held in pretrial detention. They can be held pending trial. That's the way it works in the federal system. I think that's the way it should work in the state system as well, both here in Missouri and Illinois, just about everywhere. If you have these kids who are associated with incredibly violent street gangs who are picked up for a violent felony, I see no reason why they should be bonded out on cash bail, on recognizance, on whatever. They should be held until they're tried because they pose a danger to the community.
Well, there's so much going on in the criminal justice system, both at the state level, you're describing in Missouri, we know in Illinois, as well as at the federal level too. And some of it doesn't have to do with Trump, remarkably enough. This coming out of the Southern District of Illinois, there are 3 federal judges, David Dugan, Nancy Rosenstengel, and Stacey Yandel, that in their courtrooms are providing extra time for oral arguments only for young lawyers who are either female or minority.
Oh, dear Lord.
I mean, this has drawn a complaint to the Seventh Circuit, but they have increasing opportunities for courtroom advocacy is their identical order, and it provides more time for addressing the court based on your gender or race. I mean, I rarely get surprised anymore. How can you get surprised by the identitarian politics of our culture? But this is really something.
I think these federal judges should be remanded back to the first year of law school constitutional classes that they apparently missed. Equal protection means equal protection. That's just not a distinction you're allowed to make under the law. And it's outrageous that their courtroom policies are essentially setting up a segregated system of justice depending on the color of your counsel. I mean, it's absolutely insane. But as you said, I mean, this identitarian politics movement, it's got to stop. It's balkanizing America. It's causing immense social harm. We need to treat each other as fellow Americans and fellow people, and just strip down this system of race-based spoils that the left seems so intent on enacting.
We've got a problem with how we fill judicial vacancies in Illinois, how we slate judges in Cook County. So we've got some issues, and this has been hotly debated for a while, although there's not much debate in Illinois anymore since there's no opposition party. But as part of your candidacy for Attorney General, you have a plan to change the way that judicial vacancies are filled in Missouri. So I'd be interested to hear the exact problem and your solution.
Sure. And just by way of background, during the Trump administration, I worked on judicial confirmations and nominations in D.C. I was on the teams that confirmed Brett Kavanaugh and Amy Coney Barrett to the Supreme Court, lower court judges all over America. So I have experience with judicial selection processes. Here in Missouri, we have a system called the Missouri Plan that basically turns over control of the appointment process to elected members of the Missouri Bar. What's happened is that the trial lawyers have organized. They're very adept at getting their people onto the panels that the governor is then forced to pick from. And what that's led to is, as the state of Missouri has shifted further and further right, our courts seem to have tilted further and further left. So I think it's almost an anti-democratic problem that's occurred here. I've proposed switching either to the federal model of direct appointment or just to judicial elections. But this insane situation where the cartel of trial lawyers controls judicial appointment in this state, especially at our highest courts, our Court of Appeals and the Missouri Supreme Court, it's a totally unfair, undemocratic system, and it's got to change.
Well, it's interesting because, the argument in Illinois for a long time had been we need to go to merit selection so we don't have judicial races and so on and so forth. But, yeah, the problem always is, right, so who selects the merit selection board? And as you say, you get agency capture from trial lawyers. And then even if you have conservative leadership in the legislature and the governor's mansion, you still have this problem. You're being left with a false choice. So it's really interesting, just because the merit selection argument has been made here. That's why I wanted you to distill it. Your reaction. Now let's go to the Trump trial, since I sort of foreshadowed them. Your reaction to. Let's start in Fulton County. And your assessment of whether or not Fani Willis should be, and the Fulton County District Attorney's Office should be removed from that case.
Yeah, I mean, I think the case for disqualification there is incredibly strong. The whole nation saw Fani Willis just imploding on the stand last week. This is a prosecution that was corrupted from its start by the fact that Fani Willis hired her secret lover, paid him about $1 million taxpayer dollars to prosecute Trump. It's an insane conflict of interest. She hasn't done anything to alleviate that concern. I think both she and Nathan Wade, her lover/special prosecutor, need to be disqualified, and I'm hopeful that entire case is dismissed. More than that, though, based on her testimony last week, I think Fani Willis faces very real criminal jeopardy. She may be in more legal trouble than President Trump or any of his co-defendants are at this point in terms of a potential federal honest services fraud or wire fraud prosecution. I mean, what's gone on there is absolutely insane, and I'm happy that some of it at least is finally coming to public light.
And the insanity continued in New York when, on last Friday when Donald Trump, they're ordered to pay more than $360 million after being found liable for defrauding banks and insurers, even though they got loaned from banks and they repaid them with interest.
Yeah, I mean, the banks were testifying in President Trump's favor. His insurers were testifying in his favor. They said, these were good loans. We knew exactly what we were getting into. There was no fraud. I'm a former federal prosecutor. This is the first case I've ever seen of a fraud allegation with no victim. So the fact that they're trying to dismantle President Trump's businesses he spent a lifetime building, it's politicization of our legal system run amok. And we're certainly hopeful that on appeal, I think we have very strong arguments, and we're hopeful that we can get that judgment overturned, or at the very least stripped back dramatically. But it just goes to show how far the left are willing to go, weaponizing law enforcement to go after conservatives like President Trump. It's anti-democratic, it's anti-American, cuts to the heart of the rule of law and our constitutional principles. So it's a very, very sad day for the American Republic, I think.
Letitia James, she did the typical sort of Elliot Ness, no one's above the law rap after the penalty was imposed. But she tried to address this argument that there are no victims here because the banks got repaid and they had no problems. Somehow she argued that New York taxpayers were the victims because Trump got away with not paying something that he would have otherwise had to pay if he hadn't provided fraudulent valuations on some properties. I mean, I don't understand what exactly she is asserting that he got away with in terms of monies owed to city or state government. Do you?
Yeah, look, I think Tish James is lying to the world. She ran for office on the platform of, I am going to sue Donald Trump and take all of his money away. She strung together this absurd case using a wildly over-aggressive, over-expansive application of this New York civil fraud statute. and we are where we are. And nothing she can say on the back end changes the fact that this was a malicious prosecution, that this case should have never been brought. And I think you have legal commentators from across the political spectrum saying that this is just a very, very dangerous thing. I mean, if you're a businessman in New York today and you know that if your politics are disfavored by the attorney general, they can just drag you into court and prosecute you for non-crimes, take away millions of your dollars, take away your businesses, take away your right to do business. I mean, why the heck would you stay in New York? It's one of the reasons why, financial sector businesses, all kinds of businesses are fleeing New York for states like Florida and Tennessee and Texas. I mean, who would want to live under that kind of a legal regime?
If this verdict, the $350 million verdict, is not overturned at the appellate level, is there a way for Trump to get this, to raise a federal issue, to get this before the Supreme Court?
I think a collateral federal attack is a possibility here. I will say, though, that the New York Appellate Division, the New York Appellate Courts, have overruled Judge Engoron twice in interlocutory appeals during the pendency of this case. So I think that even liberal judges, but more serious liberal judges in New York, understand just how extra legal, just how crazy this whole case has been from the start. And we're certainly hopeful that things move in a positive direction from here as we move into the New York appellate courts.
On the Fani Willis matter, I understand the possibility of a perjury charge, but explain why she could be open to a criminal charge of wire fraud.
Well, so let's take honest services fraud because it's a clear example. I mean, if she appointed Nathan Wade and paid him taxpayer dollars with the knowledge that some of those dollars would then end up redounding to her benefit, if she structured that appointment for an improper reason, essentially, that could fall within the federal honest services fraud statute. In terms of wire fraud, I mean, there seems to be just a ton of based on her testimony, which was absurd, there seems to be a ton of cash moving around in weird directions. She's claiming that things were reimbursed, and maybe they were, maybe they weren't. I mean, let's pull the bank records and see what actually happened here. But if I were a prosecutor in Georgia and I were watching her testimony, I mean, it's just alarm bell after alarm bell after alarm bell. And whenever you have financial transactions that are structured in a way to avoid oversight, structured in a way to avoid paperwork, essentially, which is what she was testifying to, that's where federal laws like wire fraud, like, frankly, money laundering statutes have the potential to come into play. I mean, there was a lot of money moving through her office into the special prosecutor's office, including apparently COVID relief funds. There are just any number of federal nexuses to what she was testifying about, and I'm curious to see how that proceeds. I think the fact that she testified the way that she did, the fact that she insisted that there were these cash reimbursements, essentially untraceable cash that she just had lying around her house, it was just deeply, deeply weird. And it speaks to, in my view, to her knowledge that she did something wrong and her attempt to essentially cover that up.
He is Will Scharf, former federal prosecutor, appellate attorney for former President Trump, and Republican candidate for Missouri Attorney General. The website for more information on his candidacy, Vote Scharf, SCHARF, Will Scharf, votescharf.com. Will Scharf, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Yeah, great to be with you guys. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
It's what Chicago is talking about. It's Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan and Amy on AM 560. The Answer.
This President's Day, honor the legacy that shaped America with AMAC, the Association of Mature American Citizens. At AMAC, we celebrate the